Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Entra.Chat. And today I am super excited to have Fabian with me. Fabian Bader, he's a cybersecurity architect at glueckkanja. I hope I got the name right.
Perfect.
Awesome. So Fabian like if you've been in the Entra space, you would definitely have come across him. I first came across Fabian in his blog posts, so very detailed blog posts, and it's very easy to understand the complex topics that he shares about. And then I've struck up a friendship with Fabian over the last 2 years. We've been working, catching up almost every other week as we built a Maester. So we'll come to all of that. Fabian, do you want to just give us a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be in such a nice lineup you have always every week here. So thank you for that. And
Nice.
yeah, I'm from Germany, living in Hamburg, a city in northern Germany, and helping our customers to get into Entra, but mostly Defender in recent years. And also do a lot of in the identity space, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to be talking about all the different stuff that Fabian has created, the tools, and his research is some amazing, like top-notch research that he's done, and his blog is like a source of wealth for me. Like every time he writes something, it's always very exciting to read about it. So Fabian is not very frequent blogger, but when he does, there's always a lot of meat in his posts. A lot of work goes into it. So my first question is, your blog, the name, it's Cloud
Yeah,
Brothers. Is how
that's a
it started
bit of
out.
a funny story. So
Right.
might not know that my blog is called cloudbrothers.info.
Yes.
And as you can see, I'm not too or many, and I don't feel like many. So why brothers? Many ask me as well. And
Yes.
basically, it is a bit of a thing of the past. So I worked with two colleagues a few years back, and we
Right.
decided to do a blog together. And
Okay.
if you scroll back, you will find, I think, 2 or 3 blog posts by the other two.
Right.
And as life progresses, people
Yes.
progress, they go
Yes.
different routes and different blogs. So
Nice.
Chris Brum was one of those. He now has his own blog. The other colleague don't
Yes.
have a blog, but stopped blogging. And at the end, it was just me. And I
Right.
decided I don't want to rename again the
Yeah.
blog and just keep it. And so now
Nice.
I'm Cloud Brothers.
Awesome. Awesome. Perfect. That definitely makes sense. Yeah. So let's tell the story about Meister. So is it like 2 years? I think it's 3 years now. Maybe, I don't know. The
Oh,
years
three
go
years.
by
Yeah, wow.
really quickly. Yes. So I came across one of Fabian's blog posts and the GitHub you had shared about Sentinel Pester. You had created a framework for Sentinel using a Pester framework and using PowerShell for Sentinel. And that's when it sort of planted the seed for me to like, hey, wouldn't it be good if we start using PowerShell Pester as a test framework for Entra? Like my initial focus was just Entra. So that's when I came up with sort of like, let's do something like this. And at that same time, the conditional access what if API was also, they started building it. And I was like, this will be a cool thing to build where we can use conditional access and test and find out, all the possible combinations. So initial focus was just conditional access. So I reached out to Fabian we were on Twitter right back then. And I asked him like, what do you think? And he was all in.
Yeah, I love the idea. So, as you mentioned, Pester and PowerShell always close to the heart, and having
Yes.
something where I can now test conditional access policies automatically, it was very cool to think about this. I think I
Yes.
still have somewhere the original code where it was just like no UI, just Pester, only
Yes.
conditional access.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that we got into this together, because the Pester part of it, I would say, it's not the most appealing to the eye. It's
Yes,
just
yeah,
CLI, and what we now have with the UI and the HTML report, that is so much more approachable to people who have never done something like that.
correct, yeah.
And I think it really helps the Maester project to go forward.
Yes, yeah. So Maester has like it's grown so much more than what we originally intended, right? It's so huge. It's a For those who don't know, it's a test automation framework we built. We just took existing things, put it together, but it's come such a long way from just conditional access Spotify API to like a lot of Entra. Then Thomas came along. We like Fabian said, look, it'll be good to get Thomas with all of the stuff he did in the Entra ID security config analyzer. So there is an upcoming podcast we are going to be doing with Thomas and Sami as well. So watch out for that one. It's going to be good. So yeah, so we sort of evolved, and like I catch up with Fabian every other week. We've been catching up, and so it's been fun over the last few years. I think I worked with you more than even some of my own colleagues at work because we sort of catch up frequently and discuss and work on things. Cool. And Maester, like the last time the stats I saw, we had like almost 80,000 tenants that have run Maester.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yes, it's crazy when you think of those numbers and the number of times it's been run. Like every time Invoke Maester is called to create a report, like it's been run nearly 3 million times, like 2.8 million or something times. It's crazy
So cool.
because everyone runs, the automations. Cool. So yeah, that's fun. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about Maester, but today we want to talk more about the stuff that you've done. Like there's some new research you did about conditional access. I know you do token tactics as well, like a version 2 of the module and Entrascope. So tell us about that story and how it came about. You worked with Dirk as well recently.
Yeah, happy to. So I think Token Tactics V2 is something that came along a few years ago when I was looking to test a bit of the new or then new continuous access evaluation part in Entra. So the ability to like block an attacker even when they already have the access token, something that was not possible before.
Yeah.
And most of the tooling that was available at the time just didn't support yet continuous access evaluation. That is why I took the tool Token Tactics from Stefan Borosh and Bobby Koch and rewrote it for the V2 endpoint because it was all V1 endpoint in Entra.
All right.
So I
Okay.
had to move it over to V2, and that is where also the name came from. So it was not meant as like the V2 of this already still maintained project, but it was more of I wanted to have something for the V2 endpoint.
Oh, now
And
it makes sense. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't realize that was a story because for those who don't know, Entra has two token endpoints. There is a version 1 and a V2 endpoint, which I think it'll be good to get into that as well. I'm sure a lot of people don't really know what those are and what they mean and why does Microsoft still have like version 1 and the version 2. Maybe you can jump into that as well after you finish telling the story.
yes, definitely, let's do that. Because I think it's also very important to see that there are sometimes crucial differences in both of those, how they
Correct.
handle requests.
Yes.
And yeah, basically this is when the V2 of Token Tactics started, and since then I maintained it and added new features. I had outside help, of course. The community was also very nice in like putting stuff in there. And yeah, over the last about a half a year, a bit more, I was looking into more of the conditional access bypasses. So I think it was around Christmas last year when there was some research published where the Intune endpoint was especially called out for
Yeah.
being a bit of a nasty fellow, allowing bypassing
Yes.
the compliant device method. And still accessing a lot of the graph endpoint, especially the Azure AD graph, which is, of course, still not completely gone.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was like user impersonate. So very high permissions. If the user had high permissions, you could impersonate the complete user and basically, move around certain conditional access policies that still enforce device compliance for maybe Teams, but not for this endpoint.
Right. Yeah.
And Microsoft, after initially dismissing that this was a problem, they at least now took care of it, that they removed the user impersonate and narrowed the scope of what you can actually do. And of course, you will always have those little bypasses, and those are needed because you have a bootstrap problem. For Intune, it is like, okay, you want to get something into Intune, but how you would do this if it's like not yet compliant, but you want to have compliance? This is just not possible.
Exactly.
So it's reasonable to have those.
Correct.
Sadly, not all of them are completely documented, which makes it a bit hard for an administrator to actually know why is certain stuff behaving like this or in another way. And that is basically where I began to look into the whole thing of how can I enumerate most of the endpoints that are available as so-called FOCI endpoints. For somebody who is not familiar with the term.
What is FOCI?
FOCI.
And people say different ways.
Family of client IDs, it's called. And I think if you search the Microsoft Learn articles, you find one mention of it. And there is now a lot more research out there where you can read what it actually is, but in like a few words. Basically, normally an OAuth app can only get a refresh token for itself, but never for another OAuth app. And with the family of client IDs, now you can get a refresh token and therefore an access token for another resource, as long as it's also in this family of client IDs. Microsoft has introduced this, as far as I understand, to allow seamless switching between different applications, like you're going from Teams to Outlook to something else on your phone, and you don't have to sign in every time, but it can be a sign in the background you don't see. And this special handling of those refresh tokens helped me to automate the whole process of enumerating over different conditional access policies and users, because it allowed me to go over all those applications without having to re-sign in every time, but I could just like exchange the refresh token for a new one and test, hey, can I now get a new refresh token? And if it was not possible, I was like, okay, my conditional access policy is behaving the way I want it to. And I built out a lot of different use cases, like, okay, what happens if I set a conditional access policy to always require MFA for all applications, or for all applications, but if you have one exclusion in there.
You exclude,
And
then you're
all
able
those different use cases, basically, I built up a little use case database, you would say, and stored in there which endpoint allows me still to get a refresh token and what kind of scopes do you get. So what kind of access to the actual resource behind it do you get? And Microsoft nowadays has not only like 5 resources, it's a bit more. So it got very extensive in testing, and I had to improve the token tactics part as well, because now I had to do like parallel testing to have all those automatic stuff happen in like not days, but at least minutes. And at some time in the research, I also asked glueckkanja. I think many of you who are in the Entra space and the security space know this name, glueckkanja, and he is very active with his road tools implementation. And there he did also some testing together with me, and we did a joint talk at the Troopers conference this summer in Heidelberg, which was really cool, where we like presented our findings and everything. And a lot of the stuff just now, I think 3 weeks ago, I got the final approval from MSRC to talk about everything, and
Oh,
they
nice.
decided, okay, we looked at all the stuff you sent us, and most of it now is considered by design, and they want to update the documentation over the next coming weeks.
Right.
Yeah, so I can release a bit more now after this, but at the time of the Troopers, it was a bit limited in scope what I could
Right.
release, but still I had like one finding where the Authenticator app had special permissions and was able to access scopes that you shouldn't be able to access when you don't have device compliance. And you were able like to read the telephone number of the user that is registered as an MFA method, or
Oh, okay.
list all the MFA methods that a user had
Methods.
registered.
Right.
So there were a few things where the implementation was not as tight as Microsoft might have thought in the beginning, but
Right.
in this case they fixed it. They put in a blocker in the graph endpoint, and now you can no longer access those scopes. And yeah, as one result of the whole scanning and testing, we released a website, and this website is called Entra.Scopes.com, and it's basically a long list of applications, not only FOCI, but also others that, with the help of Dirk-Jan, we were able to also test. And you can see, okay, either which scopes for a particular resource do you get. So if I use like Bing search as the application and access the MS Graph, which scopes do I get? Which resources could I access? Because they are pre-consented. And of course, we also included our research about the bypasses. So you even can filter on, hey, where are known bypasses? And then there's information in there about, okay, where is this documented? If it's documented, or maybe is it fixed now? All this we now include there as well.
Right. So let's say I'm an Entra admin, right? And I'm designing conditional access. What are the things that I should look out for based on the the research that you found? What are the interesting things you found that when people are designing policies they should be aware of?
Yeah, I think one of the most important thing to know is, and this was documented all along, if you have an exclusion in your conditional access policy, something like require MFA for all applications but this application, in the background, this will open a little gap where suddenly a user can bypass this control and do this only for a very narrow scope. So it's only for the AD graph and the MS graph, and only for certain read operations. But I think this is something most of the Entra admins don't know. And if they add an exclusion, they don't know what happens in the background. And sometimes this leads to, hey, now my application works, even if it didn't work before. And even if I didn't exclude it, especially, but some other application was excluded somewhere. And I think to know about this, it's very important. And Microsoft now also has a very good documentation on how you can prevent it. So how you can close this gap. And I guess it's something where you should look into if it's something you want to do, or if you are fine with that this control can be bypassed, because you maybe have another mitigating control already in place. So, okay, you have require MFA and require device compliance. And for device compliance, you have some exclusions, but for MFA, you don't. Something like that.
Right. You need a baseline where you don't have any exclusions at all, right? Like at least one thing, which in most cases is MFA, at least that you should have. where you don't have any exclusions. Are there any like sort of targeted ways to do it without just doing exclusion? Like the exclusion is only for the app, right? That you're talking, or
No, that is the bit of curious part. The moment that you have one exclusion, there is like a catch-all exclusion for those very limited scopes. So it's, I think,
right,
user read, and
right,
this means you can read the information about the user. And this is not only for the excluded app, but
that's all.
actually for all the apps. So if you want to try this, you could use something like the Token Tactics or Token Tactics v2 or Road Tools, just to see how is your conditional access policy behaving. And I think that's also something, if you really want to make sure that your conditional access policy is behaving like it should, you should give it a try from some of those tools that don't know any other bypasses, that just go through the flow that is documented and just try it. And this way you will see where there's maybe something unexpected behavior that you otherwise maybe wouldn't have seen. But as you already said, Merle, it's super important to have like one baseline policy in there that has no exclusions on an application basis for most of the users in scope. So excluded users is not as big of a problem because they will just exclude the user and don't have this limitation I just described. And having this with like MFA is in most of the cases the best bet, because now you have MFA as the single control that always will be required. And if you have Windows Hello for Business or other methods to sign into your machine, you already have a strong authentication, and the user impact is like super minimal.
Got it. Yeah. And for people who ask, like, let's say they say, I do have a baseline policy that says all apps, and it has, you create a, let's say MFA, right? Like, and you don't exclude any apps. So you stick to that point and keep it really strong. But then something comes up, like some particular app or some service that needs some sort of exclusion. Then is the right way to say don't exclude the app, but then maybe exclude based on a very specific user or an account, and then have them in a different policy, so you're not like compromising your overall policy and you have a different policy for that scenario.
Yeah, if it's possible, you can like not only limit it to a certain app, but you can limit it to a certain number of users, or maybe just a few users that actually need it, then that is definitely the way to go. In reality, it always can happen that you have this one application that is
everyone has
not
to use.
possible to like exclude for only a certain number of users. And that, of course, can happen. But I think, especially for MFA, it's getting less and less. For device compliance and other controls, there are definitely exclusions that you will have to implement. If you go for like AVD and stuff like that, there are certain cases where it's not possible without an exclusion on an application basis. And if you actually need it for MFA as well, then I at least would try to look into the mitigation that Microsoft has published. And this is basically, you are using an extension attribute, tagging the Azure AD graph application with it, and then building a conditional access policy especially for that then again requires MFA. But this you definitely have to test good, because it will change the behavior overall. And maybe the applications that you excluded will then still be caught up in the other one, because they are now using implicitly Azure AD graph somewhere.
Which they should not be, because it's going to get deprecated. So if you have vendors who have apps that still are using Azure AD graph, it's a good time to get folks off that. Yeah, it's one of those deprecation stories that there's a lot of work happening to try to move people off AD graph and so on. And I think today there was a message center post as well about MFA overall. Microsoft did 2 phases of MFA for admin rollout, Azure. So the Azure portals mostly are done and, finishing up. But now there's enforcement. Today the announcement was for enforcement of Azure PowerShell and CLI and all of sort of the things that would require MFA. And most of the security folks go like, yeah, I mean, all those are sort of privileged. Usually CLI, PowerShell, you should be doing MFA, like you should not be using basic auth, ROPC flows in that. But now Microsoft is going to start enforcing it from October 1st. So there's a 30-day notice, the final notice, and from October 1st, it's Microsoft will start enforcing. And even yesterday, like 2 days ago, someone was asking me like, okay, it says Azure PowerShell and Azure CLI. What about this Teams CLI? And they listed a whole bunch of other CLIs. And do those also still need MFA? And at this point, I'm like, just do MFA. Like, why are you trying to, like like carve out and exclude from MFA
It's not
for all
about
these
like,
CLIs?
how can I get around this? It's like,
Exactly.
okay, how can
Yeah.
I get to MFA?
Yeah. If you're waiting for Microsoft to enforce things, then it's sort of like at the tail end where Microsoft is seeing a lot of compromises, and that's why Microsoft is starting this enforcement, because it's the responsibility of each customer to secure their thing, right? Like you have all of the different settings you need to try, and waiting for all the deadline from Microsoft and then postponing those, like Microsoft, because of what customers share as feedback, there are all these options to extend the deadline of when it's going to be enforced and so on. But if you care about your organization, you should be doing it way before any of those deadlines that are, that Microsoft is setting, because that should be like the last resort side of things. But I know, like, I've been in IT, and it's hard to convince stakeholders and do the work and get the change, and it's a lot easier to blame Microsoft and say, see, Microsoft is enforcing, so it's done. But you should, mix that into the news and say, like, we are going to do it now because Microsoft will be enforcing it. So
yeah, but what you said there, I think it holds true very much, especially like in large organizations where you have steering committees and change advisory boards.
Yeah.
And if you are now come in there and it's like, hey, this is the deadline we have from Microsoft, and we have to do MFA now. We have saying this like for 3 years, but now Microsoft is making it us to do. I think it also helps a lot of folks out there to finally get something changed through those boards and get approval for that, because there is no other way. And also everybody's like screaming at Microsoft for like being secure by default and all that. So having those changes, I think it's one of the most important changes in the MFA story that we have seen, because now at least the important admin interfaces like Azure, they are protected, and you cannot like bypass this anymore.
Correct, yeah. But it's even then the enforcement is still only Azure. It's not like, all of the other CLI. So you should take the opportunity, and while you're doing this, just enforce MFA for everything, like all of the CLIs, any privileged role, you should just blanket say MFA, so that you save yourself a lot of trouble, down the line, because you're going to be doing this again another time, if not, right? So just get that done.
Yeah, 100%.
So you were talking about, the endpoints, right? Token endpoints, V1, V2. That's an interesting topic, fascinating one. Can you sort of walk people through, what are these endpoints, and what are these tokens, and what are they used for, and why is there 2 versions? I know people who deal with apps a lot in Entra will know a little bit of these details. But for folks in general, what are these endpoints? Why does Microsoft have these 2 different versions, and what is better? What should they be doing when someone is onboarding an app?
Yeah, so I guess if you are a regular user of either the portal or something, you won't see this V2, V1 too often, but it's even then something you will recognize because when you sign into portalazure.com, the first thing that will happen is like it will be redirecting you to loginmicrosoftonline.com. And this is where your actual authentication happens. So you enter your username, password, do MFA, all that stuff. And already at this stage, it's decided if you're going to the V1 endpoint or the V2 endpoint. And both of those are actually the authentication flow endpoints where Microsoft has like published definition on how you can like request access to certain resources. So you want to go to the Azure portal. This means you want to use the application Azure portal, and in the background you want to have access to Azure RM, the resource manager, and change something. Maybe also graph and all that, but this, let's stick to
Keep
one
it
resource,
simple.
one application.
Yeah.
And basically with V2, there was a lot more options that you could define. So with V1, you could say, I want this application and this resource.
Right.
And with V2...
So that is when you say, I can say you're talking about an app dev, right? When they're building the app, they'll say, in the URL, they'll say, I want access to certain things, or it's previously granted to the
Correct. And with V2, you have a lot of more options that Microsoft is giving you. Like you can add additional fields like, hey, my application supports something like continuous access evaluation. This is like a flag you can now set in this endpoint, and only the V2 endpoint will understand what you are talking about. So in the background, both of those endpoints, they talk a bit of a different language. It's mostly the same, but there are subtle differences in how they interpret certain things and how you have to request those access information. And at the end of both of those flows, you always will get a so-called bearer token. And this is a combination of different tokens. In many cases, you will get something called an ID token, an access token, and also a refresh token. Sometimes you don't get the refresh token, but let's stick to all three and just go over them for quick measurement. So the ID token is basically something that the application can use to say, hey, who are you? Oh, hey, you are Fabian. The application can use the information in the ID token to identify you. There's information about the groups you are in. All that stuff can be in the ID token.
And the app can just read that and show the username, their full name in the app, the right-hand side. Like the app doesn't need to make another graph call to just get the display name.
Exactly.
And it's in the token that comes from
all the
Entra.
Important information is already in this token. You can use it as an application developer to do initial authorization information even, with that. The second token, the access token, it's currently something where you also can look into as an application, but you shouldn't do that.
Yes. Jinx, right? We both said at the same time. An app should.
And one reason why you shouldn't is because the format of the access token, it's something that actually only the resource you are accessing, so Azure RM in our example, has to understand. So you as the application don't have to understand it. And there are even efforts from Microsoft to encrypt the whole token. I think currently it's only implemented in a few rare cases. I have not yet seen it widely, but basically in this access token, there's a lot of other information stored that the actual resource needs to understand who you are and what to do with it.
Correct. Yeah. As an intermediate app, it's meant for the actual resource, right? If your app, you're signing in and you're going to use SharePoint resource, the token is meant for the SharePoint resource or the backend system to read the token and do things. But the app itself that's in the middle, maybe a mobile app some developer is writing, they shouldn't read the token because at some point maybe Microsoft might encrypt it, right? If you use the token and build some functionality, the day that Microsoft changes that format of the token or like encrypts or make any changes, your app will fail. And then you'll go like, Microsoft made changes, but that's one of the things where it's not a published API or documented thing that you should look at when you're building your app.
From a security research standpoint,
Yeah.
the access token is still very, very interesting.
Yes.
So the day Microsoft will encrypt it, I will be sad a bit.
As a security researcher. But you should be overall be happy that
it's always signed, so you cannot change it. So that's already good.
Yes.
Yeah, and the last one you get is a refresh token. And for the refresh token, it's already true that you don't know what's in there. So this is some, I would say, random string. Of course, it's something generated by Microsoft that for them will have some logic, and they most likely can decrypt it in some way and extract information. But you, as an application developer or somebody who has not access to those certificates, won't be able to make any sense out of it. But this refresh token is super important to avoid having to sign in interactively every time, because now your application can use this refresh token to ask for a new ID or access token after some time has passed, because normally an ID or access token is about an hour lifetime, and after that you have to somehow refresh it, and this is where the refresh token comes in handy. You can now go again to one of those endpoints, V1 or V2, and say, hey, this is now the refresh token flow. I want to have a new access token or a complete new set of bearer tokens, and then you will get a new set with new identifiers. But the refresh token, and this is also a very nice thing for us security folks, it will have the same session ID over the whole lifetime. So it makes it even like able to track if an attacker got a hold of such a refresh token, we can track, okay, what did they do, which resources were they accessing with it, and then from them try to see what did the user do in this particular application, maybe even.
Cool. Yeah, so that's a really good overview of like, the token endpoints. So what else have you been looking into?
Yeah, so the last few months were mostly this, but also one pet peeve of mine came up recently, and this was like the Defender for Identity team or the XDR team. They released a new table to us in the Defender XDR suite, and I did I think 2 years ago now, a whole blog series about the Microsoft Graph activity log.
Yes.
And this is basically all the information when somebody is accessing the MS Graph and they are reading data from there, or they are updating a resource, patching something. This log source will give you insights who did when what, or at least to some extent. And the problem for many companies was this is like a super big log, because of course there's a lot of information in there. Many applications, or I would say most applications, at some point use the Microsoft Graph to gather information now. So you will see a lot of requests against this endpoint, and in this log, every get, every patch will be in there.
It's crazy, right? Like if a user just opens a Word doc, they don't do anything. They just click to open a Word doc. All of that gets logged, and the API calls that are made just by
if you
viewing,
press like your Windows button, the little image that is shown of you, this will be from the Microsoft Graph. So
correct. So if someone presses the Windows key and the window, the start menu pops up, that's a graph call as well. Yeah, it's crazy.
So as you can imagine, very big logs, very much data, and if you want to ingest it, like 2 years ago, it was something you had to do in Sentinel, so extra cost for you. And now we have this in XDR, and as like with all XDR logs, those are included in some of the license that you have purchased from Microsoft to use XDR. I think in the preview, they don't have any mention of the exact licensing yet, but I think this will come when it moves to GA. And but now you don't have additional costs. So you already paid your license fee for, let's say, the MDE or for MDI. And now you get this new table completely free of charge in addition to what you already have. And this was like super cool to see. And so I did a bit of a revamp, revisited my old blog post, and did a comparison also where Thomas Naunheim really was a bit faster than me. He did an awesome comparison and allowed me to use it then in my blog post. And yeah, so there are differences in fields and what information you will get
between the graph API for getting the graph activity log and this
between
table
the Sentinel forwarded data and the stuff that is in XDR. So XDR has a bit of a narrow scope, but it's still every get, every patch will be in there. So it's not like a filtering of identities or calls. It's more of, okay, you don't have the exact same columns. And I think for like what it's meant to do in the XDR space and this like threat hunting, it's already now giving us a lot of information. And something like I mentioned with the session ID, there's also something called a unique token identifier that you can use to match. And this is available and super helpful in finding who used when what. And now we can even like go for who's using a tool like Graph Runner and extracting all your information about the whole Entra ID. You can now detect.
You can easily now track, right, when and set alerts and know when it's
why is like somebody from human resources extracting all your service principals. That's not something that is normal.
Right, exactly. Cool, awesome. So that's with all of the activity. I remember when we worked, when it was in private preview, obviously as an MVP, you had access to the Graph API when they were doing the Graph activity logs. So there's a lot of feedback you shared and helped improve all of that. So
yeah, that was really nice to have an early peek.
Nice, cool. All right, the final topic, source of authority.
Oh yeah,
is another one
that's a big one, I think.
Yes.
Currently it's not that big, but I think it will be big in the next 1 or 2 years for many companies.
So let's set the stage. What is this SOA, source of authority? I need to do a visual for it, but lots of people are very excited.
I'm looking forward to that. So
I just posted today. Yeah, I did a visual today after a long time on some passkey stuff. So the SOA is a really interesting one. People have been waiting for a long time. We had the Zero Trust workshop, and we say first, then next for what people should do with when thinking of Zero Trust holistically. And in the next, there are always some boxes we put and say, no, you can't do this today because we don't have that feature yet. Like Entra doesn't support it yet. And so this group source of authority is one of it that's now become available. So what is it in your words, and why is it important?
Yeah, for people who are like, what is Meryl and Fabian talking about? SOA. So basically the idea in the whole identity space is you always have some source of authority, SOA. And this is just one system. This is maybe your payroll system or some other system that is basically saying, hey, this is exactly how a user should look like or a group look like. And for most deployments out there, for a long time, this has been Active Directory domain services. Of course, as I said, maybe you had a payroll system, but they were just writing the data to ADDS. And then from there, it got like distributed to other systems. But if you wanted to change a name or something, you always had to do this in AD. And with now the group SOA change ability.
So what was the problem then? Why, can you give an example of what
Yeah, one
cost
problem I think
issues
most
when you're doing that?
admins
Yeah,
that have gone to the cloud and they like configured Entra Connect and all the
yeah,
groups were now synced and everything was super. And then
yeah,
they wanted to change something. And
right.
then they gone to the Entra portal and, hey, I want to add a user to this group. And it's like,
Right.
okay, I can't do this. Why can't I do
Yes.
this? Oh, okay, because it's an on-prem group. So source of authority is on-prem. So the only options you were left with like is create a new group in Entra and like move everything over and but this was like super tedious
Yeah.
and that is the reason why many folks
Yeah.
like were like, okay, I still have my AD, I maintain those groups there. But for other groups like MC65 groups, I'm using the Entra portal.
Yeah.
And for the help
Yeah.
desk, this gets super confusing super
Yeah.
fast.
Because one example for me practically was we had some groups and we started using them in Intune to say, assign these apps to these users in who are in this group and so on. So it was now only being used by Intune and certain places in Entra, maybe in a dynamic group. And you couldn't go and make any changes. Like if you were to delete and create, you had to go to all the places in maybe Intune and SharePoint sites where that group was used, and then you had to switch to using the new group. It was like a lot of work, and
Yes.
people were like, okay, I'll just keep going back to on-prem AD to add members in that, which people don't really like doing that.
Yeah, and basically now we have this ability. I think it was just a few weeks ago that the initial preview was launched into public preview. And now you can set a little property on basically any synced group that tells, hey, now your source of authority is Entra. You are now managed in the cloud. And as soon as you set this, it gets editable in the cloud, and your AD on-prem group is like completely unhooked. So any change you do there, adding somebody, removing somebody, renaming it, whatever you do,
Yeah.
it's just overwritten every time the sync cycle goes about because there is no automatic write back. So that's also important to know. If you do this, it basically means you are uncoupling this group completely from your AD. So if you have something that is reliant on this group in your AD, you
Correct.
maybe should think a bit more before doing this immediately. But for groups where you were just waiting to move them finally to the cloud because you don't need them anymore, that's your perfect opportunity. You can change it, and you can change it on a per group basis. So you don't have to decide, oh, I want to do this now for everything or everything in a OU. No, you can do it in the cloud, change it, and there's even like the opportunity to roll back, like remove this flag again. So
and make
you
it
can like
sync.
even test it before, and if there's a problem, move back and test it then a bit more. And so far, it looks super promising because you now have the ability to change the source of authority, and if you do it smart, you can then change your on-prem group to a universal group. And for universal groups, there is with the Entra sync even a write back possible now. And this means you now have full circle if you need for some reason this group still on-prem for whatever old application that wants to query an LDAP group or whatever it may be, you can do it this way around.
Yeah.
Of course.
Sorry, go ahead, finish.
Basically, I just wanted to mention, okay, if you're changing it from local to universal or global to universal, there are other implications that you should be aware where you can use the group and all that stuff. But just as a general gist, if you have like this simple group you want to move to the cloud, it's now possible, and write back is possible if you change it to a universal group.
Yeah. Like in the past, I've written scripts that are running daily, which sort of look at the users in the group, and there's a manual sync happening between the on-prem group and the cloud group. if someone is added to the cloud group, it adds that same person to the on-prem group and vice versa. So
I know
you
those.
can get rid of a lot of those scripts by switching to using the group source of authority, so that it can come. You can manage more things in the cloud, make life simple for you.
Yeah, and I think we now also see this trend moving forward. Like Exchange just last week or 2 weeks ago now published, hey, you can now change the source of authority for a currently on-prem managed Exchange user also to the cloud, meaning this whole last Exchange server that you still had standing, or even if you had it removed, but you had to like use the
Keep it.
on-prem
Yeah.
commandlets to change the attributes.
Right.
This now also gets moved to the cloud, and there is the ability to now do this in Exchange as well, which is super exciting to see, because that's definitely the way forward. We should go like move away from as the like authority of your identity being somewhere on premises to Entra ID, and making the AD only something that is consuming information from Entra for those applications that still need it, where you cannot move finally complete to the cloud. So I think this change, seeing it and how it evolves now, is really, really cool.
Yes, yeah, lots of exciting stuff to come there.
Yeah, one thing, if you change this group of SOA to look out for, is to definitely make sure that it's clear to everybody that this group is no longer managed on-prem. So you can like even delete it because it's no longer needed on-prem. Of course, only if it's really no longer needed, but for Entra, it's no longer needed. So as soon as it's cloud managed, you can delete it, and it won't be deleted in the cloud. So no problem there. But there's like no indicator. There's no like little flag that you are seeing or description change. So if you're just moving it to the cloud and somebody is not aware of that and is still changing the group on-prem, they will be a bit disappointed that their changes never work.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, to make it cleaner, you should either do the write back and make sure that it's syncing back again, or you should delete it so people won't get loose groups. You end up with like two different groups and you won't know who got added in different places, right?
Yeah. One thing I also came across in my testing is I have scoped my cloud write-back groups to a certain OU. And of course, the first time I did this and I changed it to universal, I changed the SOA to the cloud, and nothing was written back. And I was like, why is that? Yeah. Until I was like, oh, of course, I have to move this group now in the scope of
into the OU.
cloud sync. Otherwise, it will be like, I don't know it, I cannot sync it. And nice. After doing that, write back worked perfectly.
Cool. And you set up Cloud Sync for that, right? To do the write back?
Correct. So currently in my environment, I have like sync from AD to the cloud using Entra Connect. And the cloud sync part is just limited to group write back at the moment, but giving me the option to move further workloads over time.
Yeah, we covered that with Danya in one of our early episodes.
Yeah,
of being running Connect Sync and Cloud Sync side by side.
It's a good reference. So with Christopher Brum together, I'm doing a talk about, hey, do you still need Entra Connect? Is it still needed anymore? Yeah. And this was one of the talks we watched multiple times, and we even have like a little snippet out of it that we used in the talk. So you will see it at Workplace Ninja US at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to share as well. So an announcement for the folks listening, both Fabian and I will be presenting about Maester at Workplace Ninjas in December. So if you want to, join in, you should register. There's going to be so many people. It's a lot of really good folks will be coming there for Workplace Ninjas.
Yeah, and it's the first time for the conference being in the US. So there were Workplace
Yes.
Ninja in Switzerland and other European countries, but this year,
Yes.
first time in the US. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think John is doing an awesome job preparing everything. It really looks awesome what
Yes.
he's building
Yeah.
up there.
Very, very exciting. Like I'm seeing all of the speakers, and like you're going to get not a triple dose, right? A quadruple dose of Fabian. He has 4 sessions that he's
Yes,
going to be presenting. So, it's a lot of work.
we'll be busy 2 days.
Yes, yes. Fabian was already doing 3, and I said, "Look, I'm doing Maester. You have to jump on. We both have to present."
Yeah, I think but it was like, I couldn't say no to this because our initial release of Maester we had to do separately. You did it in the US,
Yes.
I did it
Yeah.
in Europe for the
Europe.
PowerShell conferences. And so,
Yes.
yeah, we have to do it once together.
Nice, nice, cool. I'm definitely so. Yeah, we've been working for like 3 years now, but I'm going to see you in person for the first time. So I definitely can't wait till December to see you in person and catch up with everyone else as well.
Yeah, definitely. Looking
Cool.
forward to that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fabian. You've been a really awesome, you're such a wealth of knowledge, all the research you do, and the things you do. I really appreciate all of the researchers who sort of work with MSRC and help make Microsoft secure, right? So that's a huge contribution that all of you do towards the community. And I'm super appreciative of the time and effort that goes in, not only in the research and then working through with MSRC and so on to raise those things, and either it ends up being changes in the product or in documentation or in guidance. You overall helped our community, so very, very much appreciated from everyone at Microsoft and the community as a whole, true as well.
Thank you so much. It means
Cool.
a lot to you.
Yes, absolutely. That's the least I can do, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I think you do your fair share of community work as well. So,
like that's nothing compared to like all of you who do so much. And yeah, I do want to get all these people on the chat on the podcast. So I need to get Dirk at some point, and all of the other folks too. So looking forward to that.
thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Cool. All right, folks. Until next time. See you again.
Bye.